Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today's a big one. We're going to be talking about the newest album from Logic called Everybody. Before we begin in earnest here, I want you all to sit down so we can have a serious conversation about race and mainstream American hip-hop. Actually, let's not do that. Mostly because the comments in this are all going to be a small to medium-sized minefield anyway. And more importantly, because it's a more complicated question than I think I'm personally equipped to answer. Suffice to say that with hip-hop being a primarily black art form with a predication towards social commentary that still sells a lot of albums to white audiences, race tends to come up. And then it faces a backlash from often predominantly white fans who just want to hear the bars, man, instead of content that speaks to the culture and the black community at large. But that's a much bigger issue. But also given that hip-hop often sits in a major intersection point of popular culture, especially for younger audiences towards the mainstream, inevitably you're going to find rappers who are bi or multiracial, which can present its own set of questions surrounding where they fall in the racial divide, should they choose to even engage with the conversation. And there's more of them than you might think. Drake, J. Cole, Slug from Atmosphere, Kid Cudi, I could easily go on with this. But when it comes to the artist who is aiming to target this directly most in his music and themes, or at least reference it a fair bit more, you gotta talk about Logic. Now, I've reviewed him twice before on this channel. Under Pressure being a damn great major label debut that I really liked. His follow-up a year later with The Incredible True Story, aiming to pull off a sci-fi narrative that couldn't quite back up some of the ambitions, but was still kind of solid in its production and bars. But I had heard some odd things going into Everybody this year. For one, it was reportedly going to be another concept album following off of The Incredible True Story, which it kind of is, but kind of not. We'll get to it. And for another, one of the major underlying plot ideas is going to be a utopian post-racial society looking back upon modern Earth, which it really kind of isn't, but again, we will get to that. And given that at one point Logic was going to title the album African Aryan, that didn't help matters. And considering his guest list included heavyweights in conscious hip-hop like Killer Mike, Chuck D, and Black Thought, opposite tracks of Juicy J, Khalid, Alessia Cara, and Neil deGrasse Tyson, and the record was also running about 70 minutes, well, I knew it was going to be something, I knew that, even if the single seemed to indicate similar issues of conceptual consistency and narrative that plagued The Incredible True Story. But again, Logic's a really good rapper. I do like a lot of his flows, and I respect this kind of ambition, especially for mainstream hip-hop. So, does he have something for everybody? Well, this album frustrated me to no end. Again, not because it's bad, this is salvageable, but because for as imaginative and ambitious as Logic can be, it's getting increasingly exasperating how he's not really paying off the big ideas on display on this project, or sticking the landing in a lot of his execution. Because, just like on The Incredible True Story, Logic is bringing a painful amount of earnest sincerity to the narratives that he's trying to weave, and he's aiming more broadly than ever before with fast-paced flows and swells of orchestration that are trying to be more effervescent and heavenly than ever, and yet I'm liking this a lot less and less, and that's starting to be a problem. And decoding what the real issue is here will take a little bit of explaining, so before we get to the concept, let's discuss the actual rapping and production on this album. Now, I've noted the similarities between Logic's flow and that of his contemporaries many times before, but maybe it's just a factor of Kendrick Lamar evolving his own flow into more intricate and complicated territory, or J. Cole and Drake steadily becoming less interesting in their bars. But Logic does seem to be coming a little bit more into his own on this album, and I can appreciate that. It still drives me nuts how often he chops off the end of his bars with repeated words or production gimmicks instead of an actual punchline, or how so many of his rhymes feel kind of starved for greater detail in his storytelling. But look, I'm still a sucker for a fast flow, and Logic's got those in spades. Even if on a song like Everybody, you could probably remix it with Kendrick Lamar's Alright, and it wouldn't even be that difficult. Now, it's not that Logic isn't capable of bringing some of this detail. Both Anxiety and Take It Back end with lengthy spoken word monologues that touch into Logic's anxiety attack in 2015 and the family history, which he's already touched on plenty of times before, but this time he's got a fresh twist, of which he's already become something of a minor meme among some online, especially YouTube music critics. Again, we will get to it. So you have to wonder why he has so many filler bars across the rest of his verses that he could have packed with more detail, and yet, strangely, he doesn't. And here's the thing, I really do like a lot of Logic's production here. Sure, with all the pianos and strings, it can feel a tad too polished, which is why I really dig when the thicker horns or a real bass guitar can supplement some of the beats. And there are some potent instrumentals here. The faster tempo of the beat playing off the guitar touches on the opener Hallelujah, the huge gospel swell touches around the textured groove of Confess that I really liked, the vocal sample that anchors the bassy grind of the synth that plays against the more distorted vocals and rougher percussion on America, the touches of horns and strings that manage to swell through Africanarian. Even if Killing Spree feels like it can support your average standard trap banger, that blubbery bass, it's got some impact against the richer synth tone. I can kind of groove to it. Now, I do think some of the weedier guitar tones, they could use a little bit more to supplement them on like Take It Back or Most Definitely, but really, the production has a sort of rich opulence to at least support some big ideas. And Logic brings in enough decent singers on the hooks to support them that I can get behind a lot of these hooks. They are not bad. This is a catchy record, but like it or not, those hooks have to support something. And this is where we get into the minor meme that might as well become the thematic underpinning of this entire project. Yes, the fact that Logic brings up that he is biracial so often can be easy to mock, especially if you're more cynical, and especially given that he doesn't seem to have much self-awareness surrounding what that means outside of his own experience, but it really is at the root of the emotional arc of this album, most of which links back to how Logic grew up, as he was dismissed by his racist mother and adopted siblings as black, and yet coded white by his schoolmates, most of his audience, and the majority of the music industry. That's how they identify him. He feels stuck between two worlds, and he desperately wants to bring them together as one society that just transcends race. And while there is a part of me that kind of admires this idealism to a point, the more this record continues, the more that I'm realizing that Logic is kind of skimming the surface on ideas that really could have used a little bit more space in all of those filler bars, or in some cases outright repeated verses. He could have gone in more in depth, and he doesn't. And it also becomes clear that for all of the tough talk, he's not really engaging with the reality of taking a real political stance right now in 2017. Take America. Following Black Thought and Chuck D delivering some solid verses, he delivers a verse where the first person he calls out is Kanye. And even there, he's still saying how much he loves Kanye's art, how much he respects him. And yeah, he follows it with statements that they need to run against the GOP, not run from them. But it's not a verse that reflects any sort of political reality right now. And there's little to really follow through with it, especially with his song Inkblot with Juicy J right after that, has him taking upon the role of a materialistic trap rapper while not really believing it. But it's not like he's gonna stop Juicy J from telling other people to kill themselves, which kind of puts a damper on your anti-suicide song a little bit further down the album, Logic. But that ties down to another thing. For as often as Logic wants to speak for other perspectives, Black Spider-Man is full of that in order to bring people together. More often than not, the perspective just circles back on him in an increasingly shallow viewpoint on the social issues of the world, which comes across as especially wrong-headed on Most Definitely, where I don't think any poor college-aged American right now would be saying fuck Medicaid. But that ties back to part of the framing device that runs through the album, which tells the story of a man named Adam, because of course he is, who after dying in a car accident confronts God, played by Neil deGrasse Tyson, because again, of course he is. And now he's doing this in purgatory, only to realize that this Adam guy is about to be reincarnated, as he has been many, many times before. In fact, in this entire universe, there's only ever one soul that has lived every life at every point, and that's Adam. So any good or evil you might do to others, you're only doing it to yourself, though you don't technically realize it. So okay, let's put aside how this doesn't really make any sense with any Judeo-Christian concept of the soul. It does stupid things when you consider free will, and cause the majority of systems of ethics to completely fall apart. After all, to quote the director from the best season of Red vs. Blue, there are no punishments for the terrors we inflict on ourselves. In the larger picture, it reflects the same damn self-aggrandizement from Logic that annoyed me so much about The Incredible True Story. I mean, think about it. The one soul that is Logic is in all of us, and we just don't know it. And since he acknowledges that soul is imperfect, why don't we all come together under his unique imperfection, able to transcend boundaries of race, gender, and sexual orientation? And it's very telling that he can still assert that unification while still asserting his continued dominance as a rapper in hip-hop. That once racial barriers are down, we won't just be the same, but better. As much as he dismisses white privilege on everybody, I'm not seeing the self-awareness that when it comes to his career, how he's benefited from that, especially in comparison with other conscious MCs who certainly haven't charted like he has, despite similar levels of hype and publicity. And that can make the lack of detail in his bars all the more galling, especially when he's pulling on various perspectives on songs like Black Spider-Man or Most Definitely or even Inkblot. It's an easy way to co-opt the voices without taking responsibility for the truth of their perspectives. And look, to be fair to Logic, I doubt he's even considered any of those implications, as he's still trying to process his own internal issues of anxiety and racial identity, where J. Cole, of all people, in a lo-fi conclusion advised him just to relax and find acceptance in himself and God. But there's a part of me that doesn't think Logic even got the message with that, because there are thematic inconsistencies all across the entire album, not helped by all the times Logic is playing a character that has a voice distressingly similar to Logic, or how Killer Mike's outro on Confess and about belief in God that has just enough weight to distract from the fact how it doesn't remotely fit in with the divine reincarnation narrative or transcendence, or how right before J. Cole's outro, we got a snippet from the characters from The Incredible True Story, which implies this is in continuity with that record and everything that came with it, and oh my god, my head's starting to hurt. Oh look. The more I think about this album, the less that I'm all that impressed with it, even despite the fact that I really want to be. Logic's trying. But for once, J. Cole's reconciliation actually makes the most sense with this. It's low-key, but it has some emotional weight. And if you're looking for that sort of conflict between biracial artists, it's not like it's unfamiliar territory. I just covered Hooray for the Riff Raff examining very similar territory, and many of the Brother Ali albums that I've been listening to in my backlog touch on this with much more maturity and consideration than Logic's even considered. Again, I appreciate his ambition. I like his production and a lot of his flows, but this was an overextended thematic mess that tried to do way too much. And I didn't even touch upon how Logic views anxiety as a hero to strengthen him, or how the Suicide Number song felt incredibly thin with all the who can relate lines, or how his attempts at commentary on trap narratives have been done better so many times and with a much more cynical eye, if you like a flimsy grab at subversion to land the radio. Look, this is a strong 5 out of 10 and most certainly not for everybody. Really, just Logic fans at this point, at least from my point of view. Again, I respect the chances that Logic is taking, but he needs to give some more serious thought to the ideas that he's tackling going forward, or he's gonna end up in real trouble, because this sort of social commentary, he can do this a lot better. Just saying. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. I'd like to like and subscribe. I'd be more than grateful. I know the Logic review is bound to be controversial, so the poll's up there if you guys want to tell me how wrong I am. And the link to buy it's in the description down below. If you guys want to have any other comments on my description or on my presentation here, I'm more than grateful to hear it. And beyond that, if you guys want to get involved in my scheduling process, the link to my Patreon is right there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once per week, the higher contributors get to add records to my schedule. I'm going to be rejiggering my Patreon a little bit in the coming couple days, so you stay tuned for any more details there. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.